Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to Multimusic Technology. Today I'm having a look at the Erica Synths Bullfrog. Something like that. This is a remarkably intentional synthesizer. It's designed with an unusual remit to be the way that education can finally bridge that gap between science and music, between art, creativity, maths and tinkering. Somehow bringing together the elements of music technology to be able to plop onto the desktop of a student and for it to survive and for it to be used to introduce concepts of synthesis, to expand upon modular patching so that students and teachers and kids can understand what the heck this is all about. It's a brilliant intention and it really does hit the mark in so many absolutely vital ways, because I'm married to a teacher. I have some inkling as to the challenges that teachers face when trying to introduce something new and groovy and fantastic into their classrooms, when actually what they really need is well organised, reasoned out and clear lesson plans and instructions. And that is something that Erica Synths are dealing with. I will come back to that. But for the moment, what I really want to do is look at it as a synthesizer to see what this offers to anyone, perhaps a beginner. Most certainly this is a perfect system for a beginner, but for other people too. Is it going to work for you? Would it be a decent little desktop synthesizer to have? Well, yeah, possibly. That's the sort of thing I'm going to look at. It was designed in collaboration with Richie, who is an electronic music pioneer, DJ, producer, musician, that kind of thing. And so it's a departure from what Erica Synths would normally do. It's not black. For one, it is not black. It's extremely colourful. It's playfully colourful. In fact, it's the sort of thing that would look quite at home in like your GP surgery's waiting area for children. Alongside that thing that you're moving the thing on the wires and other things that are going to give you diseases. It doesn't look like a dark Latvian piece of techno gear. It looks inviting, it looks fun, and none of that takes away from the awesome insides that are in this thing. The other thing I should point out straight away is how flippin' rugged this is. It's not going anywhere. If it's being kicked into primary schools, then it needs to survive sticky fingers, people dribbling on it, things like that. Absolutely will. This is rock solid. If it's going into high schools, you're going to need to somehow combat the absent-minded just knocking it about, throwing a pencil case, crunk, crash. Everything in here is as solid as I have ever felt on any synthesizer ever. It certainly does the job. Made of metal, tough as old boots. So physically, it is absolutely designed to survive, and it will. I have absolute faith in its ability to last longer than a term in a school. we'll keep referencing. We will reference education as we go along, I think, because that is the design impetus behind it. I mean, I've heard Gert say that he used to be a science teacher, and this is something that he's very, very interested in. And we know this already because Erica Synths have produced all of those DIY kits with a view to them being educational, to teach you circuit design and to teach you more than just soldering stuff together. And it works. So they have this vibe, this desire to be involved in helping kids and beginners and other people get in a synthesis. And that is extraordinary. It's a wonderful ideal. Right, the synthesizer then. Well, I'm cheating at this point because I'm using their fabulous system of voice cards. This twangy thing here, you might not have noticed that. This is an acid baseline voice card. And what it does is it creates a patch. There's a patch hardwired in here that at the moment there's nothing patched because it is a modular synthesizer. There's nothing patched. I plug that in. Things are patched and you can play it. That's something we're going to come on to in a little bit. To start with, I'm going to put that to one side. We're just going to look at the synthesizer as it is. Now, it's quite interestingly sized. I absolutely assumed when I first saw about this, and I saw news about this, that it was going to be Eurorack sized. I expected it to be able to plop into a Eurorack, no bother, easy to expand. I expected the modules to be removable, all that kind of thing. No, this is more like 4U big chunky, and that enables you to have these big playful knobs. It has the ability to have the space. It offers a much more engaging interface for newcomers than Eurorack would. Eurorack can be terribly fiddly, really fiddly, off-puttingly fiddly. This, no, you are right in there. Now, it is completely Eurorack compatible, all the patching and bits and pieces. It is modular and can modulate itself into other stuff. That's not a focus of what I'm doing today. So what you've got here ultimately is a basic synthesizer voice. You've got oscillator filter, VCA, envelopes. That is it, a single voice. Now, there's some other little bits and pieces in here that are quite interesting, but it is deliberately straightforward, because you're trying to teach synthesis. There's no point having weirdo stuff going on when really you're just trying to get a note out, trying to understand that, trying to understand what a filter does, trying to understand the influence of envelopes within the system and how all of that comes together. That is what it's trying to do. If you're looking for something esoteric, something complex, something that's going to take you to the next level, then this isn't it. This is foundational. This is at the bottom of everything that you build up from it. However, with things like this slot that we will come to, it has secret powers. It has special abilities, and it could go into all sorts of interesting places. Let's have a look at the synth itself. So you've got the VCO at the top here with pitch. You have outputs. Now the outputs actually appear in the mixer down here. There are a couple of little quirks which I don't always necessarily completely make sense to me, but I'm going with it. So the outputs of the VCO are down here in the mixer. You've got a sine and you've got a pulse. Now both the sine and the pulse can be shaped, interestingly, can be pitched with a 1 volt per octave input. You can mix it with a noise generator. Then you can patch a mix of that into the filter here, low pass filter in green with resonance, which then goes from here and spills into the VCA, which you can control the level. It has a delay circuit in here, rather nice little analog delay effect, which is very cool. Then you have 2 envelopes and a sample and hold. Clock divider over here, which is unexpected and something that you don't use for a little while until you work out, oh yeah, I could use it for this. So that's very cool. That is it. So you've got your flow from your waveforms to your filter to your VCA. There's a little bit of hard wiring, I guess, in the background in order to get you to the outputs at the back. You've got a headphone output, a mono output. You've also got MIDI in, CV and gate in at the back. Over here, you've got a very cool manual gate button. Now this is like a clacky keyboard button, and this fires the envelopes. So without having a keyboard attached, you can absolutely make it work. The envelopes are also free flowing. You can put them into loop mode and they will just move by themselves. Sample and hold as well can also be free, or it can be gated. These switches are also not going anywhere. They're fantastic, these switches. I can't overemphasize the build quality enough. It is a tank, this thing. Right, so how do we get sound out if I'm not using a voice card? Well, you have to patch it. That's the point, is that you patch it. Now, because of its educational beefiness, its intention, its reason for existing, it comes with this fabulously thick, fully illustrated manual. It's available online too. You can go and check it out now. But the fact that it's here, that you can write notes in it and you can get on with it, it's just an amazing resource. And again, coming back to education, resources is absolutely what teachers need. Now, the first half, or the first bit of the manual, goes into a lot of depth over what filters are, what waveforms are, overtones, harmonics, how that works, waveforms, timbre, what is sound. It goes into everything you need to know before you even start plugging stuff in, so that you have some rudimentary understanding of the nature of sound and synthesis. Voltage control, what a subtractive synthesizer is, until you finally get to the Bullfrog itself. And from here, it shows you how to patch in the VCO, the noise. It talks about sine waves, it talks about filters, pulse waves. It takes you through every single step, and every step has a number of patch examples and also a quiz to make sure that you're doing it. You know, this is educational thinking, and these things are very, very important and enormously helpful. And it takes you through, your patches get more and more complex as you go. So, obviously for bright sparks like me, I have learned something from this, I have to say already, which I might show you at one point. But it is straightforward enough for someone who knows anything about synthesis just to get stuck in. Now I dropped a patch cable. And as we know, to get sound, what you need to do is take the output of something, like the sine, plug that into the VCA. Ta-da! There it is. Turn the sine up. Woo! That's way above what I can hear. So it says on here that it goes from 20 Hertz to 10 kilohertz. I'll just have to take its word for that. And in the mixer, you've got the ability to change level between the sine, the pulse, and also the noise. So you've got a mix out here. So if I take the mix out instead, that's all three. Take out the noise, take out the sine. That's the square. Now on the square, so look at those waveforms. So on the square and also on the sine wave, you have shaping, which is your regular pulse width stuff on the square wave. Then on the sine, you've got a little bit of bending into more of a triangular shape. Which is nice. So you could then patch in an envelope, for instance, take the envelope output, plug that into CV1 on the VCA, I can stick it into loop, and then it will start to do that. You could potentially take the output of the next envelope and plug that into the attack or the release. So you can very easily use the envelopes as looping devices. Or you can use them a little bit more traditionally. If you put it into free mode, I can now use, without using the keyboard, this is connected, we'll come to that, but with no keyboard connected, you can use the manual gate just to fire the envelopes, which is pretty cool. But you don't want it to just go straight to the VCA and out. You want it to go through the filter. So we plug it into the filter, patch it in, take the output of the filter, which is down here for some reason, not entirely sure why, plug that into the audio in. I've now got my patch, so the output of the waveforms going into the filter, out of the filter, into the VCA, and into the outside of the box. So if I turn up the VCA to turn it into a bit of a drone, we can just check out this low pass filter. If I put it on sort of 12 o'clock resonance and just sweep that through. If I take the sine out and the noise, just leave it on the pulse wave. Nice. If you put it a little bit past 2 o'clock, it starts to self-oscillate. And I can take out the waveform and just have it play by itself. It's nice. So the last element within our little synthesizer voice here is it has this built-in delay. The VCA is hardwired into it, and all you've got is a dry and wet mix knob. Of course, with the second envelope, I can patch that in to the filter to give that a bit of Shazam. Lovely. So there you go. That's your standard, very, very standard patch. Now you can plug in a keyboard. And that can operate as the pitch and gating of the synthesizer. And you don't have to plug it into the front. You can plug it into the front. It does have a 1 volt per octave input here. But you can plug it in the back because there are available patch sockets for. Now it has this sample and hold circuit over here, which is very useful in being able to get sound out of it without having to use a keyboard. But it's a proper sample and hold, so in which case you need to patch it together properly. So by that I mean you need to take the noise output from the noise generator, plug that into the sample and hold input so that it has something to sample and hold on to. Oh yes. Then you can take the sample and hold out and use that somewhere interesting. But in order to do that, of course, the noise is now mixed in with your mix out. So if I just take the pulse output that I can do individually, alternatively, I can use that in the filter. Cool, it's got some nice abilities within here. I mean, I've gone very simply from a regular synthesizer voice into something already quite interesting. And I'm not using any extra effects, there's no extra reverb or anything, it's purely being generated by the Bullfrog. Now it is quite restrictive, you don't have a whole lot, but this modulation section over here can get quite versatile and quite interesting, because not only do you have an envelope output, you've also got a bipolar output, so that completely reflects the entire waveform and gives you a much larger LFO. The other thing you can do is I can take the sample and hold, and if I speed that up enough, I can stick it into the FM input over here and create something even more unusual. Or maybe not, maybe not. Other interesting outputs, you have a dry and a wet output on the delay, which is quite interesting. So you can route two different things out of there. You've got two lots of CV in on both the VCA and the VCF, so you can both envelope it and sort of LFO it, that sort of thing. You've got CV input for the sine shaping and also the pulse width modulation here, which is quite interesting. And then you also have individual inputs on the mixer that will cancel out the waveform that's going to it. So you could mix in external stuff. So if you were to add to this, you could patch stuff into the mixer. You could add further LFOs, bits and pieces like that, into different elements of the synth as you go. The other thing you can do to make it run itself is to take the pulse output from the sample and hold, plug that into the divider, get the divider working. You can use that to then trigger the envelopes at different speeds. So this is kind of, again, assuming you don't have a keyboard. I could take that to gate that part, then use a slower one to gate the filter. So there is a lot of fun to be had just with a very basic, straightforward layout. Other thing I should mention is that it does have an inbuilt speaker. I mean, it's not awesome, is it? But it's something. And in a classroom setting, it's loud enough for kids to be able to hear without it being so loud that it's going to be a battle of loudness about the place. It's there. It's something. I think it's a worthwhile thing to have in its context. So, I mean, there are limitations. It is just a basic synthesizer. There's a couple of things that, that are not ideal from my point of view. The fact that the envelopes are attack release as opposed to attack decay means that if you've got something which is causing a note, like for instance at the moment when it's gating it on and off using a square wave, it means you don't the envelopes are always going to be more or less the same length, and you're having to use the release time. You're having to increase the release time on the amp in order to allow the filter to be heard through that, if you know what I mean. If it was a decay envelope, then you could have that happening immediately while the amp is still open. So had it been, an ADSR or an AD instead of an AR, that would perhaps have added to it. But then, release in itself is an interesting quality. You like that as far as it interacting with the keyboard and what you're doing. So, there's decisions in that. The other thing is that you can't leave the envelopes running as LFOs indefinitely. Well, sort of you can. If I take the gates out, put them into loop mode, they're now running as LFOs, essentially. But what happens when you press a key is that they stop. They are now being gated by my key press. And then continue to loop once I've let go. Whereas what I'd quite like is to be able to put some tremolo on the sound or some vibrato by using one of these as an LFO onto the FM input or onto the filter. But I can't do that because every time I press a note, it no longer loops as an LFO. So it does feel a little that perhaps it could do with an extra LFO in there. Just maybe, but then maybe that's something that we can add later. So let's now turn our attention to the expansion port, the slot, the slit, the gap, the bit here, the jaws of creativity into which you can plug various things. So what is it? What is it? Well, the idea, let me show you this to start with, which is a blank one. So the idea is that the Voicecard can carry extra stuff. There's room for components on here that you can add actual circuits, but there's also just all of the patch sockets are revealed on here, so you can make and hardwire and hard solder an actual patch. I've done that. It's very exciting, and you'll see that in a minute. But first, let's go through what actually comes with the unit. So first of all, you have this acid baseline one that I started off with. So we've currently got this sort of nonsense going on. When I plug this in, this will, I think, override it. I'm not entirely sure. Let's see what happens. No, not exactly. So that is actually how it should be, because the patch on here can be overridden by actually patching with cables. So if I take all of this out, we will be left with the acid bass line. And then I can override it by patching something in. So for instance, if I take the sine output, plug that into the audio in here, we've lost the mix. And now all I've got is the sine wave going through. So what else do you get? Well, you get a sequencer. Little 5-step sequencer, which is very cool. It also comes with a patch. You have a choice between 3 notes, 4 notes, or 5 notes. You can also turn the notes on and off, which only turns off the gate. It doesn't mean it skips the note. It has a switch to switch it from LFO mode, so it's being controlled by the rate of the sample and hold. Or you have it controlled by the gate, which is there. Can you see that all right from there? If I put it up a bit more like that. And then you can adjust the sliders to adjust the notes. No quantization or anything, it just is as it is. But it allows you to put something in there, put it to LFO, set it running, and you can then enjoy playing with the knobs and bits and pieces to see what it is that they do. Sequencer. Nice. The other one, which is the most fascinating, is the sampler looper. Now it's fascinating kind of because unfortunately mine doesn't work. So I'm fascinated by it because I don't actually know what it kind of does. What I sort of do, I mean, it's got a microphone input and a synth input. You can record, I believe, up to 10 seconds worth of stuff into it and then have it play back. But sadly, well, let me try it one more time. So you plug it in. It's got a light here that monitors the input. So I'm on the mic, it's a little mic here. I should be able to press record and then speak into it in some way, say something fantastic and memorable. And once it reaches the end of its 10 seconds, it should, hopefully, turn itself off and then start allowing you to play it back. So it's now recorded a full 10 seconds. I should hit play and we should hear it. Sadly, we can't. And it may be something I've done wrong. It may not. It's there. I can hear it. I can hear it. Can you hear it? I can hear it.
Speak into it in some way, say something fantastic and memorable. And once it reaches the end of its 10 seconds, it should, hopefully, turn itself off and then speak into it in some way, say something fantastic and
okay, so that's the first time I've got that to function. Right, I think I've got it. Let me give it another go. What I'm going to do is... So the important things to remember are that when you're recording from the synthesizer, it comes from the output of the filter into there and then back into the VCA. So you need to have the VCA open in order to hear it. That was the thing that I was getting constantly wrong. So at the moment I've got a pulse wave going through here. Just going to do a little sweep like that and then hopefully play that back with the you'll see what I mean in a minute. So that's the plan. So I'm going to hit record. And with a bit of luck, I should now get both of those together. See, there's that sound. So I've now got both of those notes playing back together. One of them after the filter, one of them before the filter. And that's still there because I've still got the VCA up. But also, what's quite interesting about that note is I can play it as a chord. Let's switch to the microphone and see if I can use that via MIDI. Let's just see if I can get the level right for this time. La. So unity is C4, I think, which is a little bit about there. Now the microphone goes back in before the filter. I can then use this slider down here like a tape recorder. Well, that's a lot of fun. Once you've got the hang of where it goes in and out, that's a lot of fun. That, I think, is going to trip a whole load of people up, as it did me. But then you're probably brighter than me, ultimately. But once, you know, get in there, that's a fun thing. That's a very fun thing to have. So here I am playing with the Bullfrog. And what I want to do is I want to capture this patch into a voice card. So of course I can't do something simple, can I? I have to create the most ridiculously complicated patch that I could possibly come up with. It sounds a bit like this. You know, that sort of thing. So the plan is, as far as I understand it, is that what you do is make the connections that you've made here onto this card by soldering wires, soldering actual patch wires. So I've got here from my attempts at doing breadboarding DIY. Remember all that stuff I did on that? Doesn't really matter. But anyway, I've got these patch wires. These are similar ones that you get for the Korg Vulcan modular or the Bastel Castle, things like that. They're just little patch wires. And the plan is going to be, I can see what on earth I'm doing, is to stick that in there, solder it on the back so it's, you know, pretty permanent. And then you make your connection over here. And this will then be a voice card that'll plug in here and produce this patch. Now, I have questions about that. I have questions about, I mean, really, it's all this is doing is plugging the cables in. It's not adjusting the knob. So the value of anything is still going to be a major factor. So all this is really recording is the patch. And then what happens when you patch with this in? Does that override it? Or not? I don't know. This is very interesting. This is something I'm endeavouring to find out in this video. So, how am I going to do this? I'm going to do it carefully. Maybe I should take a photo of it, or maybe I should just do one connection at a time and just work my way across. Maybe that's the best way. I honestly don't know, so I'm just going to start and see what happens. Why didn't I do something simple? I'll do something simple in a minute. I'm going to throw myself into this because I like what I've done here and I don't want to take it all apart and then have to recreate it again. So I'm just going to go with the complicated one and then see what we do after that. Right, so I'll bring you over to my little bench. We'll get close in on some soldering and see what pitfalls there are in coming up with your own custom voice card. So here I am in the corner, and here's the voice card. So we don't worry about the top half. The top half is for serious people who wish to design their own circuits, and you can stick in a mixer. You've got inverting something or others, all sorts of bits and pieces that can go in here to generate new and exciting stuff, chips and that. Whereas what we're interested in is this bottom half here. This is the bit where we can actually create a patch. I'm just thinking to myself, there's no way to test this without actually doing it, is there? I can't hold things in there and expect the connection to be made because it's not like a breadboard. I am going to have to physically solder it. I'm just realizing that right now and thinking, right, how am I going to do that then? Okay, well, first things first, let's get on my safety specs and my magnifier so I can see what the heck is going on. I've got a whole bunch of patch wires, some of which are suitable, some of which probably not. So how am I going to approach this realistically? So I could go left to right, I suppose. I've got a divider, VCO, noise, VCF, power, VCA, envelopes, sample and hold, and gates. So I could start here, and that will, I mean, that's one way of doing it. I don't really know. So my first patch in that case is the divider to the pulse out. So divider in to pulse out. Divider in. Okay, I've got sample and hold out, and then I've got LFO out. Oh, that's interesting. That's in, that's gate in. So the LFO out here must be referring to the pulse out, which is essentially a square wave LFO. Yeah, I guess that's what we're looking at. So that, I believe, is going to have to go there. Now, am I going to have it being a little bit taut, or am I going to have to make them bigger in order to give it a little bit of slack? These are all good questions. Good questions. So I think what I should do is solder this one in. And then I could solder it in and then put it in the slot to see whether that worked. I mean, that's genius, isn't it? Let's try that. Right, so let's just bloody solder it. Because if it's wrong, I mean, I can desolder it, and it's only the one thing. So let's do that. Bit of solder, bit of the soldering iron. Heat it up. Where's the other end? Oh, over here. That's that. So I should be able to plug that in and it will still work, right? So we've still got this going on. So this is driving the divider. If I stick this in here and then unplug it, it's still working. Look at that, I did it. So that patch is now made on the card. And if I unplug it, it stops working. Look at that. So I could gradually go through and unpatch this as I do each cable. I mean, it's a little bit long-winded way of doing it. But it does ensure that it's working at every time. So why don't I do that? I'll make a connection, solder it, plug it in, see if it still works. Genius. Total genius. And of course, I need to call it something. What should we call it? Let's go for Cosmic Warble. And what's the date today? 12th. So it's 12/12/23. And so welcome to my Cosmic Warble. So my next question was, what happens when you plug something in? So if I was to take, for instance, the bipolar out of the envelope and plug that into the 1 volt per octave, so this has now taken over the pitch of the oscillator, so any patching I make on the front panel seems to bypass what's on the card. So that's now sample and holding the pitch. So I can essentially override anything that's on the card via physically patching. The other thing is you're going to kind of have to remember what things are patched to, because then you might possibly override. So for instance, I could take the mix out, and that's now going to include the noise and the sine. See, that's quite nice. That's a nice variation. Yeah, I think I did alright with that. I'm like, well pleased. Another patch, another Voicecard. So I just wanted to do something a little bit simpler, just to prove that I can do it twice. You've already seen my Cosmic Warble. Now I just want to make a basic bass sound so that I can just plug that in and use it. And I've done probably the most basic patch, but with a twist, because I learnt something in the Bullfrog manual, which had never occurred to me, simply never occurred to me, to use a clock divider to essentially octave down an oscillator. Of course that would work. It just never occurred to me. So I thought I would use that in order to build a 2-octave bass. Sounds a bit like this. Me and pitch bend, man, it's just not a thing. So yeah, so the way you do that is that you take the sine output here, plug that into the divider, and then take the next division down, plug that into the input on the noise, because this mixer here, it breaks the output if you plug something into the input, so that removes the noise, and instead I get this octave down from here. So there's the pulse wave by itself. And then there's the sine wave stuck in there as well, which gives it a heck of a lot of meat, I have to say. I've had to turn it down to stop it distorting a little bit. Could also go further. But yeah, that's not really working down there. But I figure just 1 octave is pretty nice. I'm going to throw that into a patch on here, and that will be awesome. That will be an awesome thing. Okay, for this one, I've got some different patch wires, which perhaps will make a neater result. So what am I doing? I'm going divider to sine output. So divider in, sine output there. See, that's an almost perfect fit. See, that's quite neat. Has to be said, that's quite neat. So sine out to divider in, and then divider 2 out to the mixer. Where's that? Noise level out, noise level out, pulse out. Well, there's the thing, I've run into a problem in that the Voicecard actually doesn't have the mixer. So while I do have sine out, pulse out from the VCO, and noise out, and also noise level out, I do not have mixer inputs. I've got this audio mix in over here in the VCA, but I do not have the option to make that work. So, I've got this whole mixer section up here, but it's not populated. So I'm slightly crestfallen at this point because I can't involve the mixer in my patch. Now, as I say, there is this mixer section here which involves adding a TL072 chip, a couple of resistors and bits and pieces. Now I could potentially populate all of that because I probably have all of the things required to make that happen, oddly. But I think that's for another time. That's for a more advanced project. So what that means for me at the moment is that I've got to calm down my patch. Let's see what else I can come up with that's going to be useful, not quite so devastating. So sine output, plug that into the sample and hold to give the sample and hold something to play with. Then use the bottom of that divider see, that's quite interesting. I'm going to go with that. My sine wave to the divider is still correct. And now I'm going to take the end of the last one of the divider, the 16th, and that is going into the pulse width CV. Let's hope that I have that. Pulse width shape CV, yes I do. And this one, I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to go all the way through without checking it out as I go. So then I want pulse out. So that should be my patch. So stick this in here. Appears to be still operating. Let's pull everything out. Just willy-nilly because heck, willies and nillies. That's what it's all about. Pretty cool. It's pretty cool. And now I've got two presets, right? Two presets. You getting the hang of this? Can I get this back into shot? I know, I'm going to call it Throbbing Pulse. So, Cosmic Warble. Throbbing Pulse. Probably need two B's in there. But I'm happy with that. Yes, I am. So there you go. There's a bit of an exploration into the Erica Synths Bullfrog. It is a basic foundational synthesizer that has all the bits and pieces you need to build a basic synthesizer voice with a few extras just to shuffle stuff about, just to sample and hold, to divide, to do some interesting, just enough modulation to keep it interesting for someone who already knows about synthesizers. For a beginner, that manual is excellent. It's pitched perfectly. It's pitched, I would say, at sort of high schooler age. It's easy to understand. The English is almost perfect. And it will take you through every stage of understanding how you patch it together to get sound and what each of the bits means, which module does what, and what that means for the sound, what that means for the tone and the timbre, and how all these things work together. It's a brilliantly put together educational package. Now, I think when you're trying to punt something into education, what's really important is that the resources are fleshed out, are fully there for the teacher to use, because teachers are under an enormous amount of pressure to deliver extraordinary lessons in a very tight space to a bunch of people who aren't necessarily interested. So what they need in order to inject a new and funky thing into a lesson, they need it all in place. It has to all be there. If teachers have got to come up with their own lesson plans, have got to come up with their own ideas for this, it's going to be a huge stumbling block, because honestly, they don't have the time. What they want to take is something that's already prepared and then deliver it. And if it's fun and engaging and cross-curriculum like this is, then all the better. But those resources must be there. Now, the manual refers to online resources which aren't currently in existence, but absolutely the intention of Gertz and Erica Synths is to have those things available when this thing properly launches into education. So that includes teaching plans, teaching resources, lesson plans. Also, you may have seen one of these, which is huge, much, much, much bigger, like 5 times the size. And yeah, Erica Synths are developing or have developed a teacher's version that has everything that this has, just in much larger size, with stereo speakers, proper speakers, and it's also got an oscilloscope in the top as well, so you can properly look at the waveforms. One of these, apparently, is going to be released as an oscilloscope, so that's a great additional thing to add to any of these systems. So the teacher's version of this, you can imagine a classroom where the teacher has one at the front, the kids all have one on the desk, sharing between 2 and 3, I imagine. And the teacher will be able to show what's going on, and then the kids can experiment and patch for themselves. And that is brilliant. If the instructions are there, if the resources are in place, then that can be a real goer. Obviously, price is a factor. I mean, these are 600 quid each. So, it's not cheap. It's Mother 32 sort of territory. But in education, you need something which is backed up by all of these teacher plans, and I don't know any other synthesizer that is. And this is a brilliant way of introducing sound, which you do in physics and science. It can also potentially touch into maths, touch into music, touch into art, all sorts of different ways you can use this. It also has elements of electronics and DIY in it. So for a school that's open to that kind of idea, this could be quite extraordinary. And it's a brilliant thing. I mean, it's a noble thing to try to introduce kids and people to synthesis and to the joys of electronic music, because there is so much to discover in here from very simple building blocks. You can have an enormous amount of fun and explore an enormously wide palette of sounds, surprisingly so. And certainly as more of these voice cards come along and encouraging kids to design their own ones, that's a whole other level. That's really quite exciting. I mean, it's not to say that the thing is so simple that no one's going to have any trouble using it. It still requires a bit of learning. It still requires reading the manual. Even if you're trying to teach this, you're going to need to spend a little bit of time with it. But I think that time is worthwhile. In February in Norwich, I'm going to be running a workshop, hopefully, with a whole bunch of these as part of the Norwich Science Fair. So I'm very, very interested to see how well this works, and also how well I'm able to present something using the Bullfrog synthesizers. That could be very interesting indeed. But overall, I think Richie and Erica Synths have produced something which could exist in a classroom, could survive a classroom environment, is ideal and excellent for beginners and people who want to learn properly about what synthesis is about. Rather than just stumble your way through like most of us, you could actually learn it properly. How great would that be? And then you can spill this out into other things. You can plug it into other Eurorack, into other synthesizers, get a keyboard, sequence it, add extra voice cards, develop it, patch it in and out to other things. Yeah, it's decent. Very, very decent. Hard-working, great-looking little synthesizer. I hope that was helpful. In the meantime, let's get some cosmic warble going. That completely failed.